Well, hey everyone, and welcome to this breakout session on impactful communication. I hope you've been enjoying the Activate at Home virtual conference so far. This has been a crazy year. So we started off supposed to have Activate in Quebec, and then it got canceled altogether. And then, just like so many of you did with your business, we all adapted and we brought this virtual conference to you. So I hope you've been enjoying it. I am really excited about this breakout session because I get to talk about something I am passionate about, and that is communication. And all of you know at this point how important communication is. Oftentimes, that is a result of you gaining a client or perhaps keeping a client from transaction to transaction. So communication is essential in your business. But earlier this year, I was doing some research on some statistics on communication, and I want to share a few of those with you. First off, 91% of employees say that their leaders lack communication skills. 91%. And I understand that you are independent contractors, but some of you do have staff members, and I think many of you would consider yourselves leaders. Well, what would those who you are leading say about your communication skills? So that's the business side. But why are all of us in business in the first place? Sure, many of us love what we do, but the reality is that the business also helps fuel our personal side. Well, here's a statistic on the personal side. Poor communication is named the number 2 reason for divorce. So whether you want success on personal or on business, I think we can all agree that effective communication is essential. But what I'm here to argue today is that impactful communication, which is the next level up, that is rare. So I'm really excited to jump into this presentation, and I want to set the table with a little bit of what you can expect. So sometimes you see a speaker and they talk about at the beginning all of the things you're going to learn in that session, but then you get to the end of it and you wonder, did they actually teach me all those things they promised that they were going to? Here's what I promise you. Today, I'm going to give you 7 specific communication ideas, each with its own challenge. Now, while I say that, even though I'm going to give you 7 challenges, I don't want you to do 7 things. I don't want you to do 6. I don't want you to do 5 or 4. I want you to pick one. Pick the one impactful communication challenge that stands out to you, and then actually go do it. Actually go implement that in your business or your personal life. So with that, let's jump right into it and start with the first communication idea, impactful communication idea, the Gosling. And no, I'm not talking about a young goose. I'm talking about Canadian heartthrob Ryan Gosling, because Ryan Gosling's in that great movie called The Notebook. And what does he do in that movie? He writes letters, 365 of them, to Rachel McAdams' character. It's a beautiful love story. And the fact is that Ryan Gosling shows us that you can make an impact with letters. Now, I'm not basing this whole idea off of some movie. In fact, everything I talk to you about today are either things I do on a regular basis or things I have experimented with in the past. In 2019, I gave myself a challenge to write letters, 1 per week, 52 letters to those who had made an impact on me in my life. And there was a couple reasons that I took on this challenge. First, a letter to me is one of the best things in the world to receive. Like, I have kept every single letter I've ever gotten in my life. And the second, I was inspired by a speaker named Hal Elrod. Now, I had the chance to see Hal at the 2019 R4 conference. And Hal is an incredible human being with so many great ideas. But one of Hal's concepts is everyone starts their morning for one of 2 reasons. Either A, because they have to, or B, because they choose to. So the people who have to wake up at a certain time, something prompts them out of bed. So their alarm's going off, and if they don't get up, they're going to be late for an appointment or for work, or their kid is screaming at them to make them breakfast before they go off to school. Something prompts those people out of bed, usually at the very last second. But the second group of people, they are the ones who choose to wake up, and usually earlier than they need to. And they typically focus on one of 6 activities. The first is exercise. The second is visualization. The third is meditation. The fourth is positive affirmations. The fifth is reading. And the sixth, the one that stood out to me, is writing, pen to paper writing. Now, what Hal suggests is that you should perhaps focus on journal writing or gratitude pages, but I took Hal's idea and I tweaked it. And instead of writing to myself, I wrote those letters to other people. And so while I aimed to send out 52 letters throughout the year, I had no expectations of what the response would be. The whole reason I was doing this is because I knew if letters mean this much to me, even if they mean a fraction of that amount to other people, this is going to be a worthwhile process. Now, the results were incredibly interesting. First off, I heard back from almost everyone I sent a letter to. All of them said it made their day or their week. About a quarter of the people wrote a letter back to me, which, like I say, that's one of my favorite things to receive. So that was a really great experience. But one of the results that really was interesting was the number of people who told me that they hadn't received a letter in 5 years, in 10 years, in some cases ever. There was one particular guy that I knew from high school, and I wrote a letter to him in April 2019. And we were friends in high school. We've stayed decent friends over the years. And I was surprised because he's one of the people I thought I might have heard back from, but I didn't. That was until April 2020. And he gave me a phone call for a different reason, and we were chatting for a while. And at the end of that conversation, he said, "By the way, Wade, I never told you this, but I got your letter last year. And at the time, I was having some struggles with my work, and there was a few personal challenges, and it meant a lot to me. I actually keep that letter on my dining room table, and I probably go back to it about once a month and read through it. And I just needed you to know that that meant a lot." Right there. If I didn't hear from the 51 other people I wrote to, that whole process was worth it based on that one situation. When's the last time somebody said that about an email that you wrote? Like, "Wow, Karen, did you use Helvetica in this? Like, I am going to frame this, I'm going to put it up, I'm going to read it every day." No, people would never say that about an email. Letters are different. Letters are impactful. So here's the Gosling challenge. I challenge you to write 8 letters by hand over the next 2 months. That's 1 per week on average. Now, these letters could be to a coworker, maybe to somebody who you met at another conference, another agent. It could be to your spouse. It could be to your kids. When's the last time you wrote your kids a letter telling them that you were proud of them? Letters are impactful. All right, that's idea number 1. Now we're bouncing right on to idea number 2, which I call the Voltaire. Make an impact with questions. And this is an interesting transition because questions are kind of the one thing you probably shouldn't do in a letter. I mean, you could write a letter asking a bunch of questions, but by the time you mail that out, it takes weeks, they receive it, they write you back. It's just very inefficient communication. But questions belong in another type of communication, and that is face-to-face or networking events. So why is this called the Voltaire? Well, Voltaire has a famous quote, "Judge a man by his questions rather than by his answers." Now, I want to give you an example of where I saw this having a real-life effect. In my job, I'm a franchise development consultant, which means I work with a territory of broker owners and I help them work on their business. And really, every broker has 3 main objectives. They want to recruit new agents, they want to retain the great agents that they have, and they want to help develop those agents. So in this particular instance, we'll call the broker Bob, that's not his actual name. Bob was trying to recruit an agent in his city, and he was really determined to get this agent. She was a high producer and thought that she would be a great addition to his office. But he was really upset. He called me and he explained that despite what he thought was a great recruiting interview, that she ended up choosing another brokerage in the city. And so I asked Bob to run me through how the interview went. And so he told me, he sat down with the agent, we'll call her Sally. So Bob sat down with Sally and he said, "Sally, listen, we've been tracking your production the last few years and it is impressive, but we think we can help bring your business to another level. There's a few reasons for that. First off, we have the highest producing agents on average out of any office in the city. Second, the RE/MAX brand recognition is 91% among consumers. So you don't have to explain what you do for a living. People just know when you wear that balloon pin. Third, we have training that we are constantly offering each of our agents, virtual and in-person, hybrid training. Sally, this is the office for you. Sally didn't end up going to that office. I fundamentally believe had Bob's conversation, his recruiting interview, included more questions, the odds of Sally joining his office go way higher. Let me explain. So Bob sits down with Sally and he says, Sally, tell me a little bit about what you want to accomplish in your career. And Sally says, well, I've had a great few years, but I think I can reach another level. Bob says, well, what's holding you back? Sally says, well, there's a few issues. Don't get me wrong, I love my broker owner. She is amazing, but our office only has so much training. I've been through all of the training, and I still have to explain what I do for a living. People don't know our real estate company. So I have to start every appointment that way by explaining what I do for a living. And I have to hire a third-party marketing company to help me out as well. And I think that perhaps in another environment, I could have more success. So Bob continues to ask a few more questions and get as much information out of Sally as possible. And then Bob can revert to that initial conversation. But now he is equipped with the information he got from Sally. So he says, Sally, you mentioned that you have another gear left in you. I couldn't agree more. And that name recognition issue, RE/MAX is known by 91% of consumers. You ask 91% of consumers to name a real estate company, they will name RE/MAX. You no longer have to explain your brand. And the training you mentioned, well, that is something our office offers multiple times a week, a combination of virtual training and in person. Sally, this is the office for you. That shift in asking questions, I believe, gives Bob a higher chance of recruiting. But it's not just me speculating at that. Research shows that people who ask questions, especially follow-up questions, are more liked by their conversation partners. Now, this makes sense. If you think about any networking event you've been to where you're in a group of people and there's a conversation on a particular subject. So let's say everyone's talking about sports. Somebody's telling a story, and what everyone else in the conversation is doing is they're racking their brains trying to think of a relevant story that they can incorporate in the conversation. But what's more rare is that people are actually listening and asking follow-up questions to those people who are telling their stories. Now, this research I mentioned, it comes from a 2017 Harvard research study where they took different groups of people, and in some groups, they asked one conversation partner to ask a lot of questions in the conversation. Other groups, they said, just proceed as normal. And the final group, they said, purposefully don't ask questions, don't ask follow-up questions. And when they rated how satisfactory these conversations were for the other person who was involved in the conversations, consistently they found that those who asked more questions were more liked. They found that when people ask more questions, they are perceived as higher in responsiveness, which is an interpersonal construct that captures listening, understanding, validation, and care. By the way, this experiment included a speed dating element. And in the speed dating scenario, those people who asked more questions were more likely to get a second date. So I know when you jumped on to this RE/MAX breakout session, you probably didn't expect to get dating advice, but all of you single RE/MAX agents out there, you're welcome. Just ask more questions in dates or on Tinder or wherever you're trying to find a potential suitor. So here is the Voltaire challenge. Over the next month, I want you to make a point of asking more questions in every conversation you are in, whether it's a conversation in the elevator or with one of the admin staff in your office, or again with your spouse or your kids. I want you to imagine that somebody is keeping score. You get 1 point for every question you ask, and at the end of every conversation, I want you to win by asking more questions. All right, on to number 3, the Strombo, make an impact with interviews. Now by Strombo, of course, I'm referring to the great Canadian interviewer George Stroumboulopoulos, got his start on Much Music as a VJ, and then went to CBC The Hour and then The Strombo Show. And George Stroumboulopoulos has showed us that you can make an impact with interviews. And this is something that I should have realized a long time ago, because I used to earn a paycheck based on the fact that I interviewed other people. I got the chance to interview some really interesting people when I worked as a journalist for Capital News newspaper in Kelowna, such as Ed Robertson from the Bare Naked Ladies and the Hanson brothers from the movie Slapshot. By the way, in that photo, I just asked the two if I could take a photo with them. They were the ones who just grabbed my collar and put up their fists. I guess they're used to doing that pose in every photo. But despite the fact that my paycheck was predicated on me asking questions, I didn't fully understand the value of an interview until I moved over to RE/MAX and I had the chance to meet one agent, Michael Thorne. And those of you who know Michael know he's an incredibly innovative individual with a lot of really great ideas. But one of his concepts early on in 2013 was that he launched a series in North Langley called My 30 Favorite Places in 30 Days. The concept was this: Michael featured various businesses, various community locations and services, and he interviewed those people, and one day at a time, he released these videos. What Michael helped me understand is that interviews allow you to leverage somebody else's knowledge and experience, but especially their audience. So let me explain. One of the biggest challenges that we have on social media is reaching other people. So we could be producing great, killer content, but at the end of the day, it's very difficult to get that content in front of a lot of different people. Take your Facebook business page, for example. You may have 200 people who like or follow your business page, so your content is reduced to that audience, actually only a fraction of that audience, unless one of two things happen. First, somebody shares that content outside to their own timeline or to another group that they're involved with. Or number two, if you put paid dollars or advertisements behind that content to reach a greater audience. Well, interviewing somebody else allows you to hack into this and to reach a greater audience organically. Let me explain. So I want you to think of 10 businesses in your area. Think of the best coffee shop in town, the best place to get a burger, the best place to get a pint. It doesn't have to be food related. The best place to get your car serviced or to get your hair cut. So you make a list of these 10 or 15 or 20 places, and then you plan out to interview these business owners and tell their story. And you can batch these interviews over 3 or 4 days. Now, an important piece here is to make sure that the video quality is good. So if you don't have that skill set, for this process, you may want to hire somebody who can help you produce great video. And then you meet with the business owner. So let's say I'm interviewing Joe of Joe's Coffee Shop. So I'm standing there beside Joe and I say, "Hey everyone, it's Wade Patterson of RE/MAX of Western Canada. Welcome to day 2 of my 10 favorite places in 10 days. Today I'm with Joe of Joe's Coffee Shop. Joe, tell us a little bit about your coffee shop and how you got started here in Kelowna." Joe tells a story, I ask a few more questions, boom, the piece of content is done. So after this interview, I say, "Thanks so much, Joe, for doing the interview. Now you're gonna be my second day in this interview series. I'm gonna post this to social media and I'll tag your business when I do that. If it's okay with you, do you mind sharing that out to your audience?" What's Joe going to say? Joe's going to be thrilled, especially if the video content is good. Here is somebody else raving about how great Joe's business is and how it's the best coffee shop in town. That is going to be fantastic content for him to share. But here's where the value comes in for you. You may only have 200 people who like your Facebook business page, but Joe, if it's the best coffee shop in town, what would he have? 2,000, 3,000? And then you multiply that by all of the different businesses. And here's a key point, and this is the importance of being with RE/MAX. Remember how I started that video. I said, "Hey everyone, it's Wade Patterson with RE/MAX of Western Canada. Today I'm interviewing." At that point, people know what I do. I don't have to say anymore. I said RE/MAX. I could even have a little balloon logo in the corner of the video. People understand that I'm a real estate agent at that point. Whereas somebody else with another company, it would be a really awkward start to the video if they're like, hey, it's Wade Patterson of Wade Patterson's Personal Real Estate Corporation. I can help you with your next buying or selling need. And today I'm with, you've already lost. You've already lost the audience at that point. It feels too salesy. I can just quickly mention RE/MAX. People know what I do, and they know that I care about the community that I live in. So this is a great opportunity to reach a greater number of people on social media. So here is the Strombo Challenge. Create a minimum 10-day interview series. Now this is the toughest one so far, right? The last two were a little bit easier. This one is one of the most difficult, but sometimes the most difficult challenges are the ones that have the best ROI for us. So on to the next one, number 4, the Rogan. Make an impact with podcasts. And I'm interested right now, maybe you could type in the group chat any real estate or business podcast that you like or you enjoy listening to. Feel free to throw those in the chat. And if you're somebody who doesn't really know what a podcast is or where you would go to even download a podcast, don't feel bad. I was in that position 2 years ago, but I had my aha moment when I was traveling on a work trip, and it was on the first flight. It was one of those flights where you had the layover. It was on the first flight, I discovered that I was sick of my music. So I have thousands of songs downloaded on my phone, but I kept hitting next song, next song, next song. And I was just so sick of all of the music on my phone. So when I got to that first airport for the layover, I put a message out on Facebook, and I asked my friends to recommend some of the best podcasts, business-related podcasts that they could suggest. And there was a ton of answers that came in, so I downloaded several of those podcasts. And on the next flight, that is when I realized the value of a podcast. And any of you who listen to audiobooks or you're already podcast listeners, you already know this. But I wasn't just killing time, I was educating myself. And it was such a good feeling that when I got back to Kelowna, those habits stuck with me. So now my drives to work didn't consist of top 40 music, they were replaced by relevant podcasts, which would help educate me. Podcasts also have done something that so few other mediums have, and that is captured people's attention for a significant length of time. That is one of our biggest challenges when it comes to communication, is capturing people's attention. Even videos, and video content is one of the best types of content you can do, but think about the last time you were on Facebook scrolling through and you saw a video that was 2 minutes and you were like, do I have 2 minutes of my life that I want to dedicate to watching this video? And you scroll right past it. But while we'll scroll past a 2-minute video on social media, we will listen to a 20-minute, a 30-minute, a 3-hour podcast from start to finish. Now, it's important to know how we're doing this. We're not sitting on our couch on the edge of our seat with the speaker right beside us listening to the whole 3-hour podcast. No, we're doing it in little breaks. So driving from appointment to appointment, you'll listen to a little bit, or then you'll go to the gym and have the podcast on your headphones for about an hour, and then you'll go home and you'll cook a meal, and on your Google Home speaker, you'll be listening to the podcast there. But over time, if the content is good, we will listen to all of that for hours on end. And that is an access to attention that is incredibly rare, and one reason you may want to consider podcasting. But there's a second reason. Let's be real. Most people tuning into this right now, this is not the challenge you're going to choose, because podcasts are a bit difficult. The barrier to entry is high enough that most people won't actually do this challenge. But sometimes when it is just that difficult, the biggest ROI exists, so the biggest benefit, because if we look at where voice technology is going, and even the statistics on how many podcasts are out there and how many people have listened to podcasts over the last 5 years, how that graph is going straight up, we see that this is a trend that is likely going to stay. Now, we have a podcast with RE/MAX of Western Canada called the RE/MAX Hustle Podcast, and I've been very involved with that, and I've learned a lot over the process. So if you have any questions, if this is something you actually want to take on, reach out to me, whether it's what equipment to use or how to syndicate your podcast or advice on creating the script. I'm happy to help. But here's the Rogan challenge. This probably bumps the Strombo for the hardest challenge that I'm going to give you today, and that is create a podcast and launch at least 5 episodes. 5 episodes is key. So often you see podcasts that are out there that did 1 or 2 and then just abandoned ship. You want to create at least 5 to give yourself a fair chance of going through this process and getting comfortable with it, but the ROI may be significant. All right, on to an easier one. The onion. Make an impact more than once. What do onions have? Onions have layers, and so does your content. And so often we create a piece of content and we assume, awesome, that is one piece of content, job done, I don't have to do anything else. But the truth is, each piece of your content, if you think about it a little differently, can actually be multiple pieces of content. So let me explain. I just mentioned that we have the Remax Hustle podcast. So each episode, you could have the attitude of, awesome, I've got one piece of content that's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, job's done. But no, we need to tell people that this podcast episode exists. So in the example on the screen, I took a photo of one of the guests. So this was episode number 50 with Scott Stratton. And Scott Stratton is a genius when it comes to marketing, really great episode. And so I took a photo of Scott and I used an app called WordSwag. You can also use Canva. There's a million other apps that you can do this on. But I took that photo, I added some text on it to show what episode number it was, and then I slapped the Remax Hustle podcast logo in the corner. Boom. We have just doubled our content output. And now we have an image that we can share on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn to let people know with a link to the podcast that the podcast is now live. So now we're done, right? We got 2 pieces of content. No, because Scott said a lot of really great things in that episode, so we want to highlight those things. There was one quote that really stood out. So when I interviewed Scott, it was in April, the height of the pandemic, and Scott said, in a time of crisis, you do one of 2 things. You help or shut up. Love that quote, so powerful. So again, I'm going to use WordSwag, but this time I'm not going to do the square image. I'm going to do a vertical image, which is story-sized. And now I have a piece of content for Instagram stories, for Facebook stories, and brand new LinkedIn stories. And here's the thing, for those of you who have the LinkedIn app, I want you to go there right now and look at the top, because there's the little circles. You might have to update the app if you haven't done that recently. Update the app, and there will be little circles at the top, which is people's stories. And there's probably, I'm guessing, going to be 4 to 10, because LinkedIn stories are brand new. But I promise you this, 1 year from now, there won't be 4 to 10. There will be 40 to 100 stories up there that you're competing with. But right now, because so few people have adapted to this, if you actually do LinkedIn stories on a regular basis, you are going to be that little circle at the top of everyone's LinkedIn app on a consistent basis, because people haven't adjusted and adapted yet. So now we've tripled our content output. One interview, we've got 3 pieces of content. So we're done, right? No, because there were more great things Scott said. So we want to highlight those things. So in this instance, I wrote a LinkedIn interview. Now, I transcribed the quotes myself, just a few key ones that he said. You can also use a transcriber service to do this, but now you have blog content for your LinkedIn, or you could take this and put this on your website. By the way, going back to the example in the Strombo section about how you leverage people's audience, I tagged Scott Stratton in this post, and without me asking, he shared that out to his LinkedIn network as well. And he has a lot more connections on LinkedIn than I do. And so that is my content getting in front of all of those eyeballs. So here is the onion challenge. Over the next month, I want you to take 10 pieces of content and turn it into 30 pieces of content. Now, I'm not asking you to triple your workload. I'm asking you to be more resourceful for the content and the work that you're already doing to get triple the output. All right, on to the next challenge, the next impactful communication idea, and that is the slide. Make an impact with direct messages. Now, I'm going to throw a photo up on the screen, and I'm wondering, maybe you could type in the chat. Let me know if this triggers a little bit of nostalgia for you. The great MSN Messenger, so many of us used it back in the day. Some of us used ICQ. But MSN Messenger was a great platform for going back and forth, which was quicker than email communication. And I went to high school in Tabor, Alberta. I was about to go off to college in Calgary. And before I moved, I was talking to my mom, and we were talking about how we would stay in touch. And obviously we would do phone calls, but I was telling my mom, you should consider downloading this MSN Messenger. And my mother is wary of technology. Like any sort of tech, she's hesitant to get into. But I convinced her it's just like email, but it's a little bit quicker. And so she reluctantly eventually agreed to download MSN. So I went off to college, and it was several months, and my mom was never on MSN Messenger. But finally, one day, I saw that she logged in. And I knew it was my mom because she was the only one without a profile photo. Like she just had that little MSN icon. And so I sent her a message. I said, hey, Mom. Then I waited a while. Then it said, Wendy is typing, and then that went away. And then eventually she said, hello, Wade, is that you? And I said, hey, Mom. Yep, it's me. How's it going? And then my mom said, Wade, how do I know this is you? And I was thinking to myself, well, there's a photo of me there in the corner, and it says Wade is typing this message. Like I thought it was pretty clear, but I said, Mom, it's me, ... So my mom said, Wade, if that's you, how many brothers and sisters do you have, and what are their names? My own mother was giving me a security question before we could continue this MSN conversation. And a part of me was really thinking about giving her a fake answer, but then I thought, no, that's gonna be mean. So I said, really a security question. Mom, I have a brother named Wes and a sister named Shauna. And then my mom typed, what town did you grow up in? Yeah, no, it wasn't good enough to ask one verification question. She had to double that up, double level of security. And I said, Tabor, Mom, it's me. And she said, okay, we can talk now. And although this is a funny story and it pokes fun of my mom and her wariness when it comes to technology, it actually points out an interesting challenge with MSN Messenger or text message or WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or any of these forms of communication, even email. And it comes down to these numbers, 55, 38, 7. These numbers represent how we communicate a message. So the 55 represents 55%. 55% of a message is communicated based on body language. 38% of a message is based on vocal tone, and only 7% of the way a message is communicated from one person to another is based on the actual words we say. Now, this might seem a little bit crazy, but let me explain to you using an example. Hey everyone, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on this breakout session. That was example 1. Example 2. Hey everyone, thanks so much for having me on this breakout session. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world than right here, right now. Right? I just gave 2 examples using basically identical phrasing, identical words, but they had 2 completely different meanings. Meaning number 1 was genuine. I was actually really excited to be here. In the example number 2, you could see that I clearly wasn't, even though I was using the words to indicate that I was. So 93% of communication is non-verbal. Yet when we use text message or emails, we are relying on that 7% to get across a full message. And think about how many times you've misinterpreted an email or you've wondered, why is this person mad at me? And turns out they weren't mad at all. It's just the way they wrote that particular email. One way we're able to change this is by incorporating video into our messages. So many of you use an app, a tool called BombBomb for video messages, which is a fantastic tool. It gives you all sorts of analytics. It tells you when somebody opens that email. It tells you when they've watched your video. And this is video email. And oftentimes, shooting a video and sending that to somebody through email is quicker than actually typing out the email itself. But you don't have to have a service or a subscription with BombBomb to send video messages. You can shoot a video on your phone, and you could send that as an Instagram direct message or through a text message or even attach it to an email. So there are options for using video, but video messages allow you to get across that 93% of communication that is missing from text-only messages. So here is the slide challenge. Send at least 10 video direct messages or emails over the next month. Those of you who already use BombBomb, this isn't your easy out. You have to choose a different challenge. But for those of you who don't send video messages like this, try it out, because I guarantee you will see great results and people will appreciate the fact that you took the time to send them a video. And on to the final challenge, the Santa challenge. The Santa is the last impactful communication idea. And you may be wondering why there's an image of a candle that smells like a vinyl store. Well, that goes back to a conversation I had with somebody named Johnny Cupcakes. So his actual name is Johnny Earl, but he goes by Johnny Cupcakes. And he was actually our speaker. For those of you who were at the Activate conference last year, he was one of our keynote speakers. And Johnny has created this awesome store that appears to be a cupcake factory or a cupcake bakery, but it's actually a t-shirt shop. So when you walk in, there's the smells of vanilla frosting and there's fridges and ovens, but when you open those fridges and ovens, there's not cupcakes, there's t-shirts. And when you buy a t-shirt, it comes wrapped in a pastry box. And every customer, whether they purchase something or not, they leave Johnny's store with a story that they can tell others. So Johnny is an expert on brand hysteria, but I had a chance to interview him on the Remax Hustle podcast, and he told me a story that really stuck out to me and was really powerful. So there was one day in July a few years ago where he was standing with his staff in the boardroom and they were chatting about the best Christmas gifts they ever received as a child. So you even right now watching this, think about the best Christmas gift you ever got as a child. And they went around and they were all telling the stories of these different gifts, recalling the nostalgia. They had smiles on their faces and it was really fun to hear all of these stories. But what they didn't realize is that their leader, their boss, Johnny, was taking note of their answers. And so over the next 6 months, Johnny sourced out all of those gifts on eBay, on Amazon, at garage sales, all of those rare toys and those nostalgic gifts. And then that year at Christmas, he gave all of his staff members their favorite childhood gifts. Some staff members cried. It meant so much to them knowing that they had a leader who not only listened to their answers and remembered those things, but actually cared enough to do that. Now I want you to remember that statistic I showed you at the very beginning of the presentation, the one that said 91% of employees say that their leaders lack communication skills. How many one of Johnny's employees on that day would have said that he lacks communication skills? My guess is 0. Johnny was an impactful communicator and it showed with his leadership skills. So why is there a photo of a candle that smells like a vinyl store? Well, I was so inspired by what Johnny told me on that day that I went back to an earlier part of the interview and he talked about one of his favorite things in life, and that is the smell of a record store. And so this goes back to his days working at a record store called Newberry Comics in Boston, and he said he just loved that. It brings joy to him. And so I scoured the internet to find a record store smelling candle, and there was one shop, for all I know, one shop in LA that sells a vinyl store smelling candle. And so I knew I had to get that for Johnny. So I sent it to him along with a handwritten note thanking him for being on the podcast, taking Johnny's example. So here is the Santa challenge. This year, give at least 5 next level kick-ass gifts to those who mean a lot to you. And this could be, it's better if it doesn't happen just at Christmas. This could be a random time just to show somebody your appreciation and perhaps be a great leader. So that is all of the impactful communication concepts and challenges. Let's run through them really quickly. So we have the Gosling, write 8 letters by hand over the next 2 months. The Voltaire challenge, ask more questions in every single conversation you are in. The Strombo, make an impact with interviews, launch a 10-day interview series. The Rogan, launch a podcast and do at least 5 episodes. That one is the toughest, if not the Strombo. And then there's the Onion. This is something fundamentally everybody should do, but take 10 pieces of content and find a way to turn that into 30 pieces of content. The Slide, send at least 10 video emails or direct messages over the next month. And the final one, the Santa challenge, give at least 5 kick-ass next level gifts. Thank you so much to everyone who took the time to watch this breakout session. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to help you out, and enjoy the rest of the Activate at Home conference.